6 EFF MPs. These include the party leader Julius Malema and his deputy Floyd Shivambu will not be attending next week's State of the Nation address. This after their court bid to challenge their suspension was struck from the court's roll. Now, the EFF members were found to be in contempt after storming the stage at last year's SONA, disrupting the president's speech. Let's speak now to the EFF's spokesperson, who also doubles up as one of the MPs who are barred from attending this year's SONA. Sinawo, Thambo, good morning to you and thank you for your time. Apart from being barred from attending this year's SONA, what other sanction do you know of that has been meted out against you?
Thanks, Xoli. So some of the sanctions which have been imposed upon us by Parties and Powers and Privileges Committee are that we are not allowed to participate in any parliamentary activity, be it at a committee level or Parliament itself, from the 1st to the 28th of February, if I'm not mistaken, for the month of February, which means that the democratic will of our people who chose to elect certain members of the EFF into Parliament who have now been suspended is forthrightly undermined. You'll be happy to know they'll also be docking our salaries for the month of February, I'm sure, as part of that. So it's almost a triple jeopardy. And what is most intentful and purposeful on their side is that they have ensured that they chose February in particular as a month in which to bar these members of the EFF from Parliament, because they know that this will be Cyril Ramaphosa's final State of the Nation address before he's democratically removed as the President of South Africa. So they want it to be without scrutiny. Yeah. And it's unfortunate that Parliament has been turned into a weapon in defense of Ramaphosa. Well,
let's understand why you find yourselves here. During the disciplinary hearings in December, the Secretary of Parliament testified there, stating clearly that the disregard for the rules of the House is what has landed the EFF MPs to the position you find yourselves today. Have you reflected on what needs to change about your approach in Parliament?
Absolutely nothing. And the employee of the very institution that is now villainizing the EFF for holding Cyril Ramaphosa accountable can't be viewed as a credible source as to what is correct and incorrect. He has to stand by his institution's sort of mandate to villainize the EFF members of Parliament. Our reflection is that we were correct to peacefully protest and holding Cyril Ramaphosa accountable, first and foremost for his crimes at and in relation to Phala Farm, but secondly for the complete collapse of South African society under his leadership, the increase in crime, the increase in unemployment, the high gender-based violence statistics, the collapse of state-owned entities and general infrastructure in South Africa, and the collapse of our economy. That is what we were raising and what we regard as the highest form or platform for protest, which is Parliament. Our people sent us there to hold the executive accountable, and that is exactly what we were doing. The mischaracterization of this peaceful protest, or these attempts to ensure Ramaphosa answers or speaks directly to his failures and his criminal activities as storming the stage, as disruption, as breaching of the rules, is deliberate mischaracterization to avoid holding Ramaphosa accountable, which we reject in its entirety.
When you say the protests by the EFF in Parliament are peaceful, some people will have a problem with that, and it is primarily on exactly what happened in February of 2023, because some EFF MPs did indeed attempt to storm the stage, and so that was seen as a direct threat to the safety of the president. And I remember the complaints about members of the security forces being allowed inside the chamber, and some of the MPs saying that that should never have been allowed. But surely that conduct from your end is something that you should regret, no?
Absolutely not. I think it's illogical for anyone to suggest that Sir Ramaphosa was under threat when we sit next to him almost at all State of the Nation's addresses. We sit alongside him. If you watch those videos closely, he was even smiling and grinning because he knows very well that no one was going to pose any threat to his life. The EFF members of Parliament had placards. They approached the stage, not stormed. because this misuse of language is what mischaracterizes the situation, approached the podium and the stage holding placards up. And the first and biggest sign of someone who comes in peace is the person who comes with their hand raised. So there was no threat to Cyril Ramaphosa. The only violation of the Parliament of South Africa on that day was the allowing of security forces who are armed into the Parliament of South Africa, where we are all unarmed, where we are all having peaceful debate and interactions as democratically elected leaders. The risk of security to members of Parliament when unidentifiable individuals came into Parliament with guns is something that must be condemned in the strongest terms. But Ramaphosa, where he is now, which is why in one of our submissions to that Powers and Privileges Committee was that Ramaphosa himself must come and testify as to whether he felt under threat, so that
that video link interrupted, and we apologize for the loss in connection there. Perhaps one final question would have been around the court process itself, because they do say that they seek to challenge certain sections of the Powers, Privileges and Immunities Act of Parliament. Wanted to know what specific aspects of that law do they have a problem with, but unable to conclude the conversation.